There's one thing you can definitely say about data interpretation for the GRE. It's that it comes up, for sure. 3 questions typically out of each quant section of 20. So 6 questions in total, guaranteed. So that's why this video is about giving you essential practice for data interpretation. The skills you're going to gain would also be useful for the integrated reasoning section of the GMAT. Given the fact it definitely comes up in the GRE, I'm surprised how few students revise for it. And what makes this practice different is not that we're going to cover every single thing that comes up in data interpretation. I might cover all of that in future videos. It's more that I would just want to cover some of the most common topics that come up and the most common mistakes that are made. And also what's different is I'm going to show you how few people get some of these questions right. Of course, if you learn anything from this video, leave a like, check out my other playlists for the GRE and for the GMAT, and subscribe. So without further ado, let's get to some official questions. Let's start with a nice warm-up question, which I'm sure you might be able to get right. The question will be, how quickly can you get it right? 94% of students got this question correct in the official ETS GRE exam, but we don't know how long they took. So let's look out for shortcuts. How many of the 50 states were in the 5 population categories from A through E? And we have the caption being distribution of the 50 states of the United States by population in 2000. If you want, you can quickly pause the video, see how long you take, and maybe time it, because here timing is more important than accuracy. If you took more than about 15 seconds, you missed a crucial shortcut, and many data interpretation questions have these kind of shortcuts. Did you count up all the number of states in A, and then plus B, plus C, plus D, plus E? Even worse, did you use a calculator? Because that really takes time to key in the numbers. That would have taken definitely 45 seconds, a minute or so. Or instead, did you notice that they tell you there are 50 states in the United States? You might know that already. And therefore, if we take away the number of states in categories F, G, and H, we're going to be left with how many states are in A through E. Did you spot that shortcut? I'm sure you probably got the answer right, being 43, but did you do it in 15 seconds? Did you notice that there are 4 states in category H, 2 in G, 1 in F, adding up to 7, take that away from 50 and you get 43, the answer B. 15 seconds and we're done. Now the questions in the rest of this video are going to be harder than this, but we're going to need more time for those questions. And we need to get that time by answering the easy questions quickly. Let's move on. This question is much harder, and only 36% of students got this question correct. It is a percent more than or percent less than question, and so few students are confident with this. Now you've got the formula on screen, but if you want, you can try to do the question yourself using your own method. But only 36% of students got this question correct. If you've done that, or you just want to hear my explanation, here it is. The question says, the number of states in the 2 population categories C and D was approximately what percent greater than, and that's the key phrase, what percent greater than the number in the 4 population categories from E through H. Now, I've done a separate video on percentages, but I wanted to cover it here, this particular type of question, because it comes up so much. There are multiple methods for solving this. You can do A over B times 100 and then take away 1, or you can use this formula. The key thing, though, that students are not sure on is which number goes where, and so many students make this mistake. They know to find the difference between the 2 amounts. So there are 15 states in categories C and D combined, and there are, I believe, 11 states in E through H. But do we do 15 minus 11? Do we divide by 11 or divide by 15? That's where students get confused. Well, here's what you need to know, and I put it in blue at the bottom. B, which is the denominator, is the value after the word than. Which of the two values, 15 or 11, was named after the word than in the question? After the word than in the question, we had the number in the 4 population categories E through H, which was 11. So 11 is our B. The number that is named after the word than is your B. That's what you divide by. So here we would do 15 minus 11, which is 4, divided by 11. B, the denominator, is the number that is named after the word than. 4 divided by 11 is 0.36, times that by 100 and you get 36%, which is A. Ironically, only 36% of students got this question correct, so there's some sort of fate working here. Anyway, what I care about is that you feel more confident with percent more than and less than questions by memorizing this formula and knowing which value is your B, which value is your denominator. Don't stress though, because it's coming up again later in this video. Time for the next piece of essential data interpretation practice. It's a new question and it's about gasoline tax revenue. Again, all of these questions are official GRE questions. Don't be intimidated by all the data. We're just going to look for simple shortcuts. The question is, what is the median of the percent values representing gasoline tax revenue as a percent of total retail gasoline sales for the 9 countries listed in the bar graph? Sounds super complicated, right? They just want the median number in the list that you can see above. Don't be intimidated. Usually the question is much easier than you think. The one mistake that many students might make, even among the 89% who got this question correct, is writing all the numbers out in order and then picking the middle number. No. There's a much quicker way. How many countries are listed here? It tells you 9. So what's the median country? If you're not sure, I've done another video on medians, but I've written the method here. We would add 1 and divide by 2. 9 plus 1 is 10, divided by 2 is 5. So the 5th country up is the median country. We don't need to list them all out, that would take a lot of time. We just count up from the bottom. Now you can count down from the top, but you'll get the same result. So let's count up the 5th country from the smallest going upwards. That'll be the United States, then Canada, then Japan, then Spain, and the 5th one is Italy at 67.6%, which is A, which is the correct answer. We didn't have to write them all up. We just needed to know how to find the median term and then count up from the bottom or down from the top. Okay, time for a harder example. Same data, but there's more data. Look at this one. 54% of students got this question correct. There's more data here, but again, don't be overwhelmed as I've written down below. The question is probably quite easy. That's actually my main message for the whole video, for integrated reasoning on the GMAT and data interpretation on the GRE. You can be overwhelmed by the numbers and the captions that you can see, but whenever I see loads of numbers, I'm like, you know what? The actual question is probably going to be easy, and I know many other people in the room might be freaked out by all of this, but I'm going to be confident that the actual underlying maths is probably quite easy. They are banking on you being intimidated. Just don't be intimidated. So this is fun. Let us read through the statements and figure out each one, taking our time. Based on the information given, which of the following statements must be true? In 2000, France's gasoline tax revenue as a percent of its total tax revenue was greater than 20.4%. So the only thing we know about France, glancing upwards, which is what I would do, is that France had 72.7% as its gasoline tax revenue as a percentage of its total gasoline sales. But it doesn't say anything about France's total tax revenue, just about its gasoline tax revenue. On the right, we have a pie chart about Germany's total tax revenue, but nothing about France. Nothing about France's total tax revenue. So that's a no from me. Confident that we can't say that statement is true. Wonderful. Time for the next one. In 2000, the price per gallon of gasoline was greater in Norway than it was in Spain. Classic trick that they want you to look up and see that Norway's percentage is higher than Spain's percentage. But read the title. This is gasoline tax revenue. Nothing to do with price per gallon of gasoline. Don't fall for that trap of just looking at the numbers and saying, okay, Norway's bigger than Spain, therefore it's correct. No, they want you to fall for that trap. That would be way too easy of an answer. Check what these percentages represent, and it's gasoline tax revenue as a percentage of gasoline sales. Nothing to do with price per gallon of gasoline. Therefore, we can be pretty confident that C is true, but let's check it. In 2000, Germany's gasoline tax revenue was more than 3 times its tobacco tax revenue. Talking about Germany now, so we would look up to the top right and look at gasoline tax revenue, which is 20.4%, and tobacco tax revenue, which is 5.6%. And some people would then say this is not certain because this is a percentage, not an amount. But if one amount is 20% and another amount represents 5%, then we know that the gasoline tax, the 20%, is 4 times bigger than the tobacco tax. 20% is 4 times bigger than 5%. Yes, we don't know the actual amounts, but they weren't asking us for the amounts. They were just saying, is it more than 3 times as big? And yes, we can say that. So I don't know about you, but this question didn't feel that bad to me. There were quite a few traps that they tried to set for us. If we're calm and measured and we don't fall for those traps, then the question becomes relatively easy. You just got to take your time and not be overwhelmed by the data. Time for the next question. As well as not being overwhelmed, you have to, of course, know your percentages. And we are back to a percent less than or greater than question. So I would like you at this point to pause the video and try this yourself to see if you've learned what I spoke about earlier in the video. Okay, let's do it. In 2000, the amount of Germany's gasoline tax revenue, which it says is 20.4%, was approximately what percent less than the amount of its income tax revenue, which was 28.6%. Now I know we don't have the actual numbers, but we can compare the percentages using the formula we all love. The formula you can see down below. Now, which number out of those two, 28.6 and 20.4, is going to be our B? Which one is going to be our denominator? That would be the 28.6, because that appeared after the word than. Therefore, that is our B. That is our denominator. Don't be off-put by the fact that we're dealing with percentages. Just treat them the same as you would any other number. We're comparing 20.4 to 28.6. Of course, we don't know the actual numbers because they never told us the total tax revenue, but we don't need it. We're better than that. Okay, so our B is 28.6 because that came after the word than in the question. Was what percent less than the amount of its income tax revenue. So we would do 20.4, take away 28.6, get that answer, which I believe would be minus 8.2, and then we're going to divide by 28.6. This gives us negative 0.286, which we can times by 100 to get 28.6 or 28.7. Given that they use the word approximately, we can round that to 30%, so the answer is C. Only 30% of students got this question correct. So the 70% either had run out of time by not using shortcuts, or they just didn't know this percent more than or percent less than formula. You need to know how to do these questions because they come up every single time, usually multiple times. I want to end on one last percentage question that comes up a fair bit as well. This is a toughie. I think this is going to be the hardest. Let's see. Yes, only 28% of students got this question correct. So you can pause the video and try yourself, or you can wait for my explanation. What makes this question harder is that we have to use both data sets and we have to do multiple calculations. At the end, we also have to do a percent equals an amount calculation, which many students aren't comfortable with. Also, by this point, you wouldn't have that much time. If Germany's total tax revenue in 2000 was approximately 170 billion, approximately what was the amount of the total retail gasoline sales in Germany that year? Let's not be intimidated. Let's work through it step by step. Where is total tax revenue mentioned in the data sets? It's the title of the one on the top right. So they're giving us the total of the pie chart. It's 170 billion. And they want you to relate that to gasoline. And we can see on the pie chart that gasoline is about 20% of the total. You should be able to work out 20% of 170 billion in your head rather than relying on a calculator, because 10% would be 17 billion and 20% would be 34 billion. You just doubled 17. Find 10%, then double it. If you want, you can round up to 35 because it said 20.4%, but whatever, call it $35 billion is the amount in gasoline tax. Now I know what you're thinking, they didn't ask for gasoline tax, they asked about gasoline sales, but we had to use that total tax revenue somehow. So without even knowing what the end result would be, we knew that the gasoline tax would be relevant. Okay, so how can we use this figure of 35 billion for the amount of gasoline tax? Well, the title of the other chart says that it's the gasoline tax revenue as a percent of total retail gasoline sales. And we know Germany's gasoline tax revenue was 35 billion. So how can we use the fact that that 35 billion is 70.7% of Germany's total retail gasoline sales? This is the percent equals amount stage of the question. Again, to restate, we know Germany's gasoline tax revenue, about 35 billion, and the chart tells us what that is as a percent of total retail gasoline sales. In other words, for Germany, that 35 billion equals 70% roughly of total retail gasoline sales. I'm approximating because the question said to approximate. If 35 billion equals 70% of the total, how can we quickly find what the total is? Again, I've covered this more in my percentages video, but what you do is you divide by the percentage as a decimal. If 35 billion equals 70%, we do 35 divided by 0.70 or 0.7. 35 divided by 0.7 to find the total. If you like, you can think of it as an equation that 35 billion equals 70% of total, and given that 70% is the decimal 0.7, we divide both sides by 0.7 to find the total. Either way, we do 35 divided by 0.7 to find the total retail gasoline sales. 35 divided by 0.7 is 50, and that is indeed the correct answer. So what's my main message from this video? 1, don't be overwhelmed by the data. Usually, most times, the questions are much easier than they look. 2, look for shortcuts on the simpler questions to save time. But most importantly, 3, know your percentages. Before you walk into that test, I want your percentages to be on point for percent equals amount questions and percent greater than or less than questions. I want you to practice dozens of those type of questions because that's what always comes up in data interpretation. So if I've taught you new stuff about percentages, I'm very happy. And if you go away and practice percentages, I'm even happier. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. You are a true fan and I am very grateful. I'll see you in the next video.